Hello and welcome to COP30 Covered, the daily podcast show from the award-winning edie editorial team, where we're bringing you all the latest news and views from the 2025 UN Climate Summit in Brazil. Why are countries still bickering about carbon markets? What is the role of businesses at COPs? And are important decisions going to be kicked down the road to 2028? We explain everything in 45 minutes or less per episode. Yes, welcome back to COP30 Covered from edie. You're listening to the voice of edie's content editor Sarah, and it is Monday the 17th of November 2025. We've officially made it to, or perhaps even past, the halfway point of the COP. Joining me in our podcast studio in a very sunny but very wintry Sussex today are our editor Matt Mace.
Hello.
And our senior reporter Siddy Mittal.
Hello.
So as I say, we're halfway through. How's everyone holding up?
Really tired today, but I don't think it's necessarily COP related. There's been a proper dip in the temperature in the UK, and I feel that's just made me more tired. And I also think the second week, I don't know, something about the second week just feels slower anyway.
Right.
And so I think it feels longer than it is because you're waiting for stuff to come out. So I'm the energy levels have dipped a little, but no doubt towards the end of this week they'll ramp back up as we get some glimpses of those all important texts.
You're quite similar to Matt, but I think my tiredness is coming out of the fact that I just had a massive cheese toasty and soup for lunch. It's put me in a slump, but keeping the vibes high and good.
So everyone here is in very much a winter mode. From what I understand, in Belém it may have stopped raining, but the humidity is still extremely high. I've seen on LinkedIn people observing, colleagues sticking to chairs opposite them at meetings, calling out for additional bottled water, and the heat is very much still on everyone who is in Belém at this halfway point. So we've had our sort of first glimpse at what's been going on in the negotiating rooms, and although Matt says it feels like it slows down a bit in terms of side agreements, I'm sure it's only ramping up for the people that have to try and get this over the line by the end of day on Friday. So Siddy, can I come to you for our top of the COPs in brief, please?
Yeah, so you're right to point out that things are slowly ramping up. Over the weekend, the presidency published a summary note revealing how consultations on the final agreement on important topics are taking shape, and it shows that there's still a lot of highly varied options on the table for a whole range of issues, including scaling adaptation finance, strengthening NDCs to reduce emissions. But I think what bears noting is that some of these options range a lot in terms of action. For example, and I saw Carbon Briefs plug this too. On climate finance, one option talks of a 3-year work program and action plan on Article 9.1, but under the same category, another suggests just simply reaffirming the previous finance goal NCQG that was agreed last year in Baku. So I think it's fair to say that these 2 days will be critical in shaping the path for the next round of negotiations. And while we're on the topic, just on adaptation finance, last week we saw the Africa group taking a cautious approach to finalizing the adaptation indicators, because they were worried that if these goals are not backed by funding, the indicators may become a burden than a boost for LMICs. And this is proving to be true, with some countries pushing back on the 300 billion goal set last year and wanting to just have the final text praise the fact that the previous $100 billion goal was reached in full in 2022. Which I think was the first and the only year where the developed countries actually met the target.
I don't think we have the data for 2023.
Yeah,
but that was late. So to sort of pat yourself on the back and say, job done, I think would disappoint a lot of people.
Definitely. So I think this is just one of several things we could expect a big fight on in the coming days. And on plans to reduce emissions, there's a concerted effort to get countries to strengthen their NDCs ASAP, but the summary note also includes an option to delay any further obligations of the 2020 aim. There's also no explicit mention of agriculture or food systems in the summary note, which I know a lot of our audiences were looking forward to, but agri-systems I think are still part of thematic agenda, so more to come on that as well. And we too will see focus shift from technical discussions by the negotiating committees of different countries to more political deliberations at the ministerial level, with countries expected to outline their priorities today and tomorrow. But I don't want to end stuff on like a bad note. So ending on a positive front, in another news, the Global Clean Power Alliance of Nations, which includes the UK and Australia among others, have published a new shared commitments to scale important supply chains. These include growing the market for recycled materials and components, it's just one of the quite some good news that we have heard from the past week, and we have got summaries of each day live on our sites. I would recommend our listeners to check that out if they haven't already.
Yeah, as Matt said, it's been a sort of whirlwind first week, and as you say about the negotiations, the deal with the ministers is that ministers tend to come for the World Leaders Summit, some of them go, and then now they're coming back. It feels almost like you've had school children that are halfway through, or at least, let's give them some credit, college students that are halfway through a project, and the professor's just going to give a bit of encouragement halfway through and provide some feedback. So that's what we've got coming in the next couple of days. The thematic agenda does continue, but we've only got 4 more thematic days, including today. And while the focus last week was very much on finance and energy and trade, we are now moving on to a highly anticipated part of the COP, which is like the nature and food sides of things. So our themes for today and for Tuesday include oceans, forests, biodiversity, children and youth, entrepreneurs and SMEs. So we'll be focusing on the entrepreneurs and SMEs today, and then looking more deeply on nature and agriculture later in the week, before trying hopefully to make sense of everything when it comes down to the line, which may or may not be on Friday. But as I said, today we're looking at entrepreneurs and private sector at COP, which I'd like to come to you for, Matt, as a past attendee at COP and a sort of tracker of this topic.
Yeah, I think I've spoken about this on quite a few of our podcasts, and that the business involvement in COP is both needed but also quite jarring when you're out there. Like the blue zone and the plenaries is very much kind of 2 minutes to midnight, and then you head into the green zone where all the sponsor businesses are, and it's all bells and whistles, almost like a kind of party atmosphere, and it's quite jarring. And business kind of involvement in COPs is not a new thing. It's kind of been there with the inception of it, basically. And I've not seen, I regret not seeing the Kyoto play when it was in the West End, but Sarah, I think you have, and that's very much about the lobby groups and how industry kind of saw a kind of window into the COP process to be able to influence it a bit more. My understanding is that essentially they use like policy advisors to the big kind of states to ensure that fossil fuels had a not necessarily a seat at the table, but certainly a kind of way into it.
Yeah, it looked like, from what I saw, that essentially the first couple of COPs, these lobby groups caught wind of what was really happening, and then by COP3 in Kyoto, which was 1997, they figured out a way to get there. So, as has always been the case, external policy advisors, business representatives aren't allowed to talk and suggest wordings or voice grievances in official meeting rooms, but they are allowed to meet with the official delegations outside of that time, and even in that time they were allowed on the sidelines as observers. So from what was depicted, there were a lot of pre-meeting briefings and notes passed across desks, and they did this very strategically with countries that made money from extracting and exporting fossil fuels, basically. And it got so bad at Kyoto that they had to introduce, last minute measures to stop so much note passing at that particular COP, and then try and stop it a bit more comprehensively in subsequent editions. So it's really interesting story to go and read up a bit more about.
Yeah, and obviously we know, like right now, that it's only official negotiators that are allowed to speak in the rooms and shape that final text. But I think there has been this kind of groundswell outside of those rooms of a business presence, largely kind of big businesses that are very kind of keen to align. I think it's that kind of double-edged sword that as climate action, sustainability, or ESG, depending on kind of what markets you're located in, has grown in prominence amongst all stakeholders, bigger businesses have sought to align with it in different ways. And COP26, we had our big kind of sponsor partner list from the official government, SSE, Scottish Power, and NatWest to name just a few. And I think what we're seeing is that big businesses can get a kind of place at COPs, but on the topic of SMEs, and which is obviously one of the thematic aspects of this, much harder for them to get out there. They even need sponsorship, they can't get transport accommodation at the cost, they might not even have the personnel to send out there. And I think there's always been that notion then that kind of COPs were for big businesses, but the fact that this COP is, I think, the second time that SMEs are mentioned on the actual agenda is a good step forward, that they're looking at the economy as a whole and not just those big businesses with the influence to shape supply chains, but those ones that are going to be located down and in other sectors.
Yeah, I think the Brazil team have really talked about looking at this as they've called it an economic transition. They want to look at the ways in which people live, work, invest, not just the numbers, carbon parts per million in the atmosphere. And this has been like a big focus last year and at this year's COP as well, which brings us on to our special guest interview for today, which is with the COP29 high-level champion, Nigar Arpadarai. So this role, the high-level champion, exists to build engagement in the COP from so-called non-state actors. So that's your businesses, but also cities, towns, civil society groups, campaign groups, NGOs. And their role is to mobilise all of those people at the COP, make sure that they're aware of it and what it means for them and that the outcomes benefit them, and to join up capacity and implementation gaps. So during her time working on the Baku conference last year, Nigar really focused on getting SMEs to the COP, and this is a mission that she has continued with her counterparts in the COP30 team. So these two teams between the COP set a target to provide 30,000 SMEs with practical climate tools and support, to ask 150 large companies to meaningfully engage with the SMEs that supply them, and also they've been engaging with the multilateral development banks to try and get more bespoke financial support for SMEs. And a lot of that has been part of a new finance sprint. I love some of the language this year. We've got sprints, circles and mutuals. So they was looking at common barriers for SMEs to decarbonise and how those can be overcome. But she's far more eloquent at talking about all of this than me. So here is that interview in full. Yes, as we'll have mentioned in the studio, it is a pleasure and a privilege to have Nigar on as our guest for this episode of COP30 Covered. Thank you so much for your time. How are you?
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to see you. It's great to talk to you. I'm good. How are you?
As well as you can be around COP season, I think.
Running around, meeting people.
Yep, and always chasing after more reports and more data. Yeah, so it's great to be catching up about, all things to do with SMEs at the COP, which I know was such a big priority for you as your work as high-level champion for COP29. And I'd love to delve into why that was so important to you and your team to get more SMEs involved in the COP process.
Well, thank you for your question, Sarah. It's great to see SME Day at COP30, actually. And why it was important for me, because overall, the private sector engagement at COP was at the center of my attention from early on in the process for a number of reasons. Well, firstly, you cannot imagine the green transition without private sector believing in it. And the more I talk to private sector, the more I'm into this subject, I understand that we need to create this ecosystem for private sector to be engaged and to believe in green transition. And secondly, if you remember, COP29 was the finance COP, actually. So it was the NCQG was the main subject that we've been agreeing on. And here we've been working with both, large companies and SMEs. Large companies, in many cases, they have technology, they have access to finance, they have sustainability as a part of their strategies, but SMEs don't. They are lacking all this support, and SME subject was important for me personally because I was looking for the topics that resonate with my understanding of sustainability and fair future for our planet. And small and medium enterprises are in the center of this picture for me because they symbolize the real problems and human talent. And bringing human talent, initiative, and energy to global climate agenda is the best thing we can do. I strongly believe in that. And another factor is that SMEs are versatile. So each country has its own SME culture and peculiarities. And so finding the way to all of them mean finding the way to the world in a sense. And one thing that I wanted also to mention that I was from the day one clear about the principle and position that I stick to, that the climate change agenda should aim at opening the power of human inventiveness and talent. It should use the technological drive, digitalization and AI to move to the right direction. And after all, these changes are going to be the tipping point for the success of this global effort, and more than regulations and prohibitions. So, and SMEs have been largely overlooked in this process, partially due to the usual, the way of bureaucracies and large corporations, and it's the backbone of economy. So SME is something that resonates with non-state actor community as well. So I think that we need to really support small and medium enterprises in their drive towards green economy.
And I think you've touched on there some of the challenges of getting SMEs to COP. They are put off by the bureaucracy. They might not understand the benefits of the transition and their role in it. They might feel that they don't have the time and resources to get to the COP. So how did you practically go about increasing SME participation at last year's COP?
Yes, it was, as you said, it's, just imagine you have an entrepreneur, you have a business owner somewhere in the global south, and you come up to him saying that, okay, we have new regulations and we have to save the planet. And this person has a credit to bank. So how can you convince him to really to change the way he is doing his business? So that's why you need to give him capacity. You need to give him access to finance. You need to show that there is a business case at the end of a story. So that's something that we need to put on. So that's why at COP29 we focused a lot on private sector engagement. So we brought large companies to Blue Zone. We tried to give them, the platform to discuss. And one of the things that we were discussing is how they are supporting SMEs in their supply chains. So one of the things that we actually started, if you remember, we have launched this climate proofing SME campaign together with collaborators. We have more than 40 collaborators reaching almost 90 million SMEs in over 100 countries. So what we did, we tried to really to be open to reach these groups, organizations, people, and say, okay, what can we do? And we've split our efforts in three directions. First was the supply chain, as I said, and also we do is now also we work towards we work all this month to COP30. We worked with the large companies with the aim to mobilize the critical mass of large businesses across energy, nature, agribusiness to actively support SMEs through capacity building and financial assistance. Also, access to finance was the second stream that we've been pushing for, and we've been calling on multilateral banks, commercial lenders and investors to increase flows to SMEs in emerging markets. And this year, in all of the milestones at New York Climate Week, we've launched the SME Finance Sprint, a central part to our campaign. And the main idea was, again, to give them the access to finance. And the third one was, of course, the capacity building. And by COP30, by today, let's say, we've tried to empower around 30,000 SMEs with tools to measure emissions, to prepare sustainability reports, and to integrate climate into their business model. So that was something that we worked a lot. And yes, I think that it resonated well with party and non-party stakeholders. And I think that this activity need to continue. If we really speak about the real honest green transition, we need to make sure that SMEs are pushing it. SMEs are at the forefront, and we need to make sure that they are not only surviving this green transition, they flourish as a result of green transition. So that's how we should put the question.
Got it. And you've mentioned the importance of essentially continuing this work, continuing this support for SMEs, building this global ecosystem. And when we look at Brazil, we know that the Brazilian presidency wants a lot of private sector participation this year. It also knows that 99% of Brazilian businesses are SMEs. So how are you working with the COP30 team to continue your work this year?
Throughout all these months, I was working very closely with climate high-level champion, my colleague Dan Yoshpe, and the COP30 presidency on the action agenda and on SME subject. And I was really happy to see how they picked up this and how they supported this idea. And if you see, it's for the first time we have SME Day as a thematic day at COP, and that was the kind of a great legacy of the work that we've started. And also we had Baku Climate Action Week just a couple of weeks ago at the end of September, where we had representatives of SEBRAE, of the Brazilian SME agency, visiting Baku, meeting with Corbia, with our local SME agency. So it has been SME subject was on the radar for all these months, and now we are here, and it's great to see this discussions, great to see experts discussing, and private sector also. And also, as you know, COP30 presidency have been working on the 5-year plan for the action agenda, and we'll outline a plan for the next 5 years of aligning real economy action with the delivery of Paris Agreement. And this plan will help accelerate action from the private sector by creating 5-year predictable framework of structured cycles to build a stable environment in business planning, and by creating shared metrics and tracking to make it easier to demonstrate impact and benchmark performance. So I was happy to see that within this action agenda, within this 5-year plan, that COP30 presidency is also seriously considering SME as one of the directions, one of the streams. So overall, we had an extremely fruitful and close cooperation, and with COP30 presidency, we continue now, and it's great to see that the subject has stayed as the legacy.
It's great to see that a lot of the good work has already been done before the summit started, that there's a good foundation. So I wanted to ask what you're hoping to see in terms of the 2 weeks itself. I know it can just fly by. I know that the focus is usually on the official negotiating rooms, but what are your COP30 hopes in terms of private sector engagement and announcements?
First of all, I'm happy to see that COPs are becoming bigger, more diverse, that we have, private sector, civil society, young people joining this process, because a couple of years ago, we didn't have all these people. We had only negotiators. But if we speak about the global climate action, we need this inclusive process, and we need everyone on board. So myself and Dan, we've been inviting business leaders to join us in Belém and to help raise, ambition and anchor commitments in a practical delivery, and not just to talk about ambition, but to show how and what is being done and how it's being turned into impact through investment, through innovation, through partnerships. And I've also been always calling private sector people to come with solutions and with technologies, because private sector has that capacity to do that. And we need their finance, we need their support. So we need to really identify, if we discuss and if we talk to private sector, first we need to identify where is the business has the most material influence and take the leadership, whether it's tripling renewables, decarbonising heavy industries, transforming food system, or investing in climate resilience. And also, as we just discussed, the COP30 presidency has come up with this thematic axis, and they really, really come into play here because they are connecting businesses, governments, and investors to deliver at a scale. So this is different thematic groups. And second, what we also need, we need the companies to work hand in hand with governments to design and come up with more ambitious national climate plans. And these plans should be implementable and should be ambitious, and they should drive growth and resilience. And that's the message that I always actually got from the private sector people, that we are ready, we are happy to support our governments, but we need a better dialogue with our governments. And also the finance is obviously the critical, and public finance can open the doors, but it's the private finance that must scale the transition, the transformation. So at COP29 in Baku, we had the major understanding and the agreement on climate finance, on NCQG. And now this Baku to Belém roadmap and COP30 action agenda are focusing on turning pledges into the pipelines, into implementation actually process. So basically, we need private sector on board. We need private sector to support finance outcomes and to support their government. So our call to everyone is join us, let's work together, and let's bring real implementation.
Great. Well, what a message to end our discussion on, Nigar. Thank you so much for sparing the time at this super busy time of year for coming on COP30 Covered. I hope you have a successful rest of your COP.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. It's always good to talk to you, and wishing best of luck to everyone.
Yes, thanks once again to Nigar for her time. And that's almost everything for today's episode. As we mentioned, attention for the next couple of days are turning thematically to nature and food systems. And we'll also have more information on how the final agreement texts are shaping up and whether ministers' coming back has really moved things along. We'll be back with a new episode of this podcast tomorrow. That's Tuesday the 18th of November. In the meantime, you can check out all of our written COP coverage on edie.net. So Matt, Siddy and the rest of the team are squirreling away on daily news in brief, detailed explainers, and of course your daily dose of regular non-COP edie news as well. So that really is everything for this episode and your further reading for tonight. But for now, it's a goodbye from Matt.
Goodbye.
A goodbye from Siddy.
Goodbye.
And a goodbye from me. Goodbye.